The chamber was already tense, but the moment Jasmine Crockett stood up, folder in hand, the air cracked like thunder. She didn't wait for permission, didn't ease in with preamble. Her voice cut through the murmurs. Crockett, loud, unwavering. Donald Trump has not only betrayed this nation politically, he has betrayed it personally. I have proof of a secret love affair with a Kremlin agent. Gasps rippled like a wave across the hall. Some lawmakers froze mid-scribble, numb. Others half rose from their seats. The room wasn't ready for this, and that was the point. Crockett's eyes locked on Trump, who shifted, gripping the edge of the table as though it might anchor him. Reporters surged forward, cameras snapping in a frantic rhythm. The speaker's gavel banged, but it was drowned by shouts. Republican voice yelling, "Lies! Fabricated lies!" Democratic voice overlapping, "Let her finish! America deserves the truth!" Crockett held her ground, the folder pressed firmly against her chest. The lighting seemed to sharpen around her, every eye fixed, every lens capturing her stance. Crockett measured, cutting through noise. Within these pages are transcripts, hotel records, and communications that tie Donald Trump directly to an agent of the Kremlin. This is not rumor. This is not speculation. This is fact. The chamber ignited. Shouts collided with gasps, chairs scraped against the floor, and reporters whispered into their phones, feeding headlines to the outside world in real time. Trump's face flushed crimson. He leaned toward his microphone, but was drowned out by the roar of the hall. Crockett lifted the folder slightly, just enough for the cameras to catch the stamped word across the top. Classified, declassified copy. That single image, a congresswoman holding a folder stamped with classified markings, pointing it toward Trump, burned into history within seconds. Clips hit social media almost instantly, sparking hashtags that began trending before the session was even gavelled to order again. The speaker shouted for silence, but the chamber had already fractured. What started as routine testimony had mutated into a spectacle, one destined to ripple far beyond the walls of Congress. And Trump? He sat rigid, eyes darting, lips curling in anger, but his silence in those few seconds spoke louder than any denial. The eruption had begun. Crockett didn't waste a second. With the roar of the chamber still shaking the walls, she snapped the folder open. Papers slapped against the desk as she spread them out, her movements deliberate, theatrical, every gesture calculated to strike the cameras. Crockett, firm, voice rising. "These are not rumors. These are not whispers. These are documented facts." She lifted the first sheet, a transcript. The bold black text, highlighted in yellow, glared under the chamber lights. Crockett, reading, "Midnight call, Moscow time, voice print analysis confirms Donald J. Trump." The phrase is repeated, "I will handle this personally. You're not just a contact, you're more." Gasps again. Reporters leaned so far forward their chairs squeaked against the marble floor. Crockett dropped the transcript and pulled out hotel receipts. The logos of luxury Moscow hotels were unmistakable, dates aligned with trips Trump swore had been strictly business. Crockett, slamming paper onto desk. Receipts, rooms, payments in cash. And don't tell me this is coincidence, not when the same rooms were also paid for by an alias connected to a known Kremlin agent. Republicans erupted. Republican voice, furious. "Those could belong to anyone. This is fabrication." Crockett, cutting him off louder. "Then explain this." She held up a crumpled, coded note. Cameras zoomed in. The handwriting was jagged, but legible enough for the press screens projecting across the room. She read slowly, each word a dagger. Crockett, reading. "This is not politics, this is compromise." The chamber froze. The phrase hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, a silence heavier than any gavel. Reporters immediately shot texts, tweets, and alerts. Phones buzzed across the room as the quote blasted into the digital bloodstream. Headlines were being written before Crockett had even lowered the page. Democratic voice, shouting across chamber. "Compromise! That's the word they use in Moscow. Compromat!" Chaos exploded again. Some members shouted for order, others shouted for resignations. The speaker's gavel hammered without mercy, wood cracking like gunshots against the podium. Through it all, Crockett stood calm, her hands steady, eyes locked on Trump. He lurched toward his microphone, knuckles white, his lips pulled back in a scowl as he shouted, "Trump!" Furious, voice cracking. "Fake! All of it fake! Russian propaganda! You're nothing but a liar!" But the cameras didn't linger on his rage. They lingered on the paper spread before Crockett, physical evidence under glaring light. And in that moment, the chamber knew. This wasn't just allegation. This was documentation. The storm had only begun. Trump slammed both fists on the desk so hard the microphone screeched. The sound jolted through the chamber, silencing the room for a split second before his rage spilled out. His face glowed a shade between crimson and fire, sweat streaking down his temple as he bellowed, "Trump!" roaring. "This is all a setup, a disgusting hoax! You people are nothing but enemies of America!" The words ricocheted off the marble walls. Some Republicans jumped to their feet, clapping and chanting his name in a desperate show of solidarity. Others stayed seated, pale, their eyes glued to the damning pages on Crockett's desk. Reporters were relentless, phones up, live streams rolling, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Every outlet was already running the clip in real time. On Twitter, hashtags detonated. Trump affair, Kremlin love, compromise. Crockett didn't flinch. She leaned forward into her mic, voice sharp as steel. Crockett, calm but cutting. "You can shout all you want. You can call it fake news. You can call it Russian propaganda. But the receipts don't lie. The transcripts don't lie. The notes don't lie. And your silence in the face of direct evidence speaks louder than any tantrum." Trump snapped back, veins bulging. Trump, spitting words. "You're a fraud! You're a liar! I don't even know this so-called agent. This is beneath Congress, beneath America. Shame on you!" He pointed his finger like a weapon across the chamber, but the gesture only fueled the frenzy. Democratic voice, shouting from the side. "Tell it to the Kremlin, Mr. Trump." The chamber erupted again, boos, jeers, chants crashing into one another. The speaker's gavel pounded like a desperate heartbeat, but order was gone. Outside, cable news tickers scrolled with urgency. Breaking! Crockett reveals alleged Trump affair with Kremlin agent, chaos in Congress. Social media caught fire, millions watching the raw feed without filters, without edits. Clips of Trump's rage, his shaking fists, his cracked voice, his crimson face, looped endlessly, memed within minutes. The phrase, "this is compromise," trended worldwide, splitting timelines between disbelief and outrage. And in the eye of the storm, Crockett simply slid the folder back toward herself and whispered into the mic, words just loud enough to be caught by every camera in the room. Crockett, low, devastating. "You paid in. You earned it. It's your betrayal." The room fell into stunned silence. Trump's mouth opened, but no sound came. His fury had bled into panic. The world was watching, and the denial wasn't enough. The moment the speaker's gavel announced a recess, the corridors of Congress turned into a hive. Cameras still glowed red, but outside the chamber, journalists were being pushed back by security. A whisper floated through the air. "Does she have more?" Crockett walked fast, the folder pressed tightly to her chest, flanked by a few Democratic allies. Her eyes carried determination, her face carved in stone. Behind her, in the shadows of the columns, a knot of Republican strategists huddled, their voices sharp and urgent. Strategist one hissed, his tone like a blade. "We'll make them all sign loyalty or the end of their careers." Another strategist leaned closer, voice low and nervous. "And if she really does have more? If these papers are only the surface?" The group fell silent as Trump himself appeared, chest heaving, sweat glistening under the harsh hallway lights. He stopped in front of his allies, his voice rough and uneven. "She will not destroy me. You hear me? Not her, not today, not ever." His words cracked through the hall, but even his inner circle looked uneasy. They knew the cameras were waiting outside, and they knew the documents in Crockett's hands had already started a wildfire. Meanwhile, inside a dim committee room, Crockett laid the folder down on a table. A staffer whispered nervously, "They're already calling. Threats, messages. They say if you don't stop now, it won't just be your career at risk." Crockett stared at the folder, her jaw tightening. She answered slowly, her voice steady as steel. "They want me afraid. But this is bigger than me, bigger than politics. If I hold back now, it all dies in the dark. Not this time." The room went silent. Phones buzzed with new alerts, hashtags climbing higher, networks replaying her words, foreign outlets picking up the story. And in that tense pause, as allies exchanged worried looks, one thought pulsed like a drumbeat through the Capitol. The storm was only getting closer, and no one could control where it would strike next. The steps of the Capitol had become an arena. The late afternoon sun bled across the sky, casting long shadows over a restless crowd. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with factory workers, pensioners clutched handmade signs, and young activists streamed live from their phones. Every inch of space buzzed with tension as if the building itself had drawn breath and held it. When Jasmine Crockett appeared at the top of the steps, the sound shifted from murmurs to a roar. Microphones stretched toward her like a forest of iron branches, cameras clicking in relentless bursts. She did not raise her hands for silence. She didn't need to. The crowd quieted on instinct, the hush charged with expectation. Her folder was tucked firmly beneath her arm. She let the silence hang for a heartbeat, then spoke, her voice sharp enough to cut through marble. This is not about party. This is not about politics. This is about survival. When the President of the United States turns his loyalty not to you, but to an enemy, it is not debate. It is betrayal. The words detonated. A roar surged through the crowd, echoing down Constitution Avenue. Veterans lifted their hands in salute, some trembling with age but steady in conviction. A steelworker hoisted his daughter onto his shoulders, her small fists pumping the air. From the back, chants began. Survival, not betrayal! Survival, not betrayal! They rippled forward until the entire plaza thundered with the rhythm. Crockett raised the folder high. The cameras zoomed so close that the texture of the paper glowed under the setting sun. For a moment, she looked less like a politician and more like a prosecutor holding the final piece of evidence before a jury. Inside this folder, she continued, are not rumors, not gossip, not spin. These are facts, receipts, transcripts, records, and they tell a single story. Donald Trump placed his vanity above your safety. He gambled your pensions, your livelihoods, your sons and daughters in uniform. He gambled the nation itself. And he did it for lust. He did it for power. He did it for himself. The crowd erupted again. Reporters barked into their cameras. The live feed surged across the internet. TikTok filled with raw clips within minutes. Twitter spun hashtags into wildfire. This is survival. Trump betrayal. Crockett files. From a balcony across the street, staffers in suits leaned out of windows, recording on their phones. International correspondents went live in French, Spanish, and German, translating her words on the fly. For the first time in decades, an accusation in Congress broke across the Atlantic in real time. On the steps, Crockett leaned closer to the microphones, her tone lower, intimate, so the crowd leaned in with her. You paid in. You earned it. It is your money, your future, your right to be safe. He took that trust and sold it for his own weakness. That is not leadership. That is treason wrapped in vanity. The words hit like hammer blows. A veteran in a faded Marine jacket wiped tears from his face. A group of teachers at the edge of the crowd locked arms and began chanting, "Not politics, survival." Television producers back in New York scrambled to cut montages, splicing her speech against clips of Trump's crimson rage in the chamber. Inside the Capitol, Republican spokesmen scrambled to the nearest microphones. One, red-faced and sweating, barked, "This is theater! A circus! Lies designed to divide America!" But his words were drowned out by the rally outside. Networks split their screens. On one side, Crockett standing tall with the folder raised, the crowd roaring. On the other, Trump's allies shouting desperately into cameras, their voices lost beneath the noise. The contrast was devastating. And then Crockett did something no one expected. She stepped down from the marble stairs into the crowd itself. Security stiffened. Aides panicked, but she pushed forward. A grandmother reached for her hand, and Crockett clasped it firmly. A veteran saluted her, and she nodded back, tears in her own eyes. She was no longer speaking at the crowd, so she was in it, among them, one of them. Reporters swarmed, capturing every touch, every gesture. A single shot of Crockett, her hand on a worker's shoulder while the folder remained pressed against her chest, burned across front pages within the hour. She raised her voice once more, this time without the microphone, speaking directly to the faces around her. He thinks this is about power. He thinks this is about ego. But look around you. This is about us. This is about whether America survives or collapses under betrayal. And we will not collapse. The roar that followed shook the marble beneath their feet. It was no longer a press conference. It was a reckoning. Crockett handed the folder to an aide. The gesture was deliberate, caught by every camera. The fight was not hers alone anymore. The evidence belonged to the nation. And in that moment, the story left Washington. It ceased to be a battle of committees and talking points. It became a movement, carried in the voices of ordinary citizens, amplified in chants that stretched beyond the Capitol walls, carried like fire across every state, every screen, every heart that had felt betrayal. Trump's defenders could shout until their throats bled, but the images told the truth. The calm determination of Crockett, the roar of the people, the folder lifted to the sky. It was already too late. The reckoning had begun. The next morning, the chamber was overflowing, every seat taken, every camera locked in place, global media pressed shoulder to shoulder. The silence before the session cracked was unbearable. Trump entered, his face pale and swollen from a night without rest. Crockett rose slowly, the folder in her hand again. She did not rush. The moment was heavy, and she let it breathe. When she opened the folder, the chamber leaned forward as one. She pulled out a single page, held it high, then laid it on the desk beneath the lights. A signed note, Donald J. Trump's own handwriting, addressed to a Kremlin agent. It says, quote, "You are not just my ally. You are my secret. Together, we hold the compromise." The silence shattered. Shouts rang from every corner. Some lawmakers staggered back in disbelief. Reporters surged forward, cameras clicking like gunfire. Trump lurched toward his microphone, but his voice cracked. "This is fake. I would never." But his words drowned beneath the rising chorus of disbelief. His allies faltered, some burying their faces in their hands, others retreating from the cameras. Crockett didn't look at them. She fixed her eyes on Trump, voice steady, cold. "You betrayed this country, and you thought no one would ever find out." He slumped back into his chair, shoulders sagging, the fury gone. His lips trembled, but no sound came. The chamber watched a man crumble under the weight of his own secrets. News outlets blasted the footage instantly. Across the world, headlines screamed. European parliaments called emergency sessions. American streets filled with protests and chants demanding accountability. In that moment, Trump wasn't just a politician under fire. He was a symbol of collapse, a fallen titan with his empire built on compromise. And Jasmine Crockett stood as the one who struck the match. The chamber's noise rose into chaos, but for Trump, it was already over.